storm and evermore. I hear the thunder, feel the fire. My soul's alive, my heart's desire to fly, to dream, to rise and scream. I am free.
Greetings, Patriots. I'm Perry Green, and welcome to this special edition of God in America. Jake Merrick is a candidate for Oklahoma governor. I've known Jake for about 4 years. I met him when he was an Oklahoma state senator. I think he was my 5th interview for God in America. I've been impressed with Jake from the first time I heard his presentations on abolishing abortion and his motivations for running for the Oklahoma Senate. He's a man of integrity and the clear favorite of the grassroots Republicans in Oklahoma. Therefore, he is enemy number 1 to the establishment. I hope you'll pay attention to the things that he has to say. Chris and Stephanie Davis, Kendall and Tammy Roberts are leaders of the Canadian County Lions Den. They invited Jake to make a presentation and shared the recording with me a few weeks ago, and I shared it with you. Since then, I've had the opportunity to promote Jake and his campaign again, and I've added this presentation. If you live in Oklahoma, I hope you will seriously consider Jake Merrick as your next governor. If you'd like the transcript from this presentation, please email me and I'll pass it on to you. My email address is on the website and in the notes. Well, until next time, let's keep the light burning.
Wonderful turnout. Let me just introduce my family who came with me today. Come on over, guys. This is my lovely wife, Nicole, and Adeline. Adeline is, her older sister could not be here with us, Emmy. She is 16, but we got 3 of us here today, and it's just, I believe the core family unit is essential. That as the family goes, so goes the nation, and so goes the state of Oklahoma. Yeah. And we can trace much of the breakdown of our society to the breakdown of the nuclear family. Yeah. So I personally make it a priority. I was thankful to be raised in a solid Christian home. So is Nicole. We now live near her family, so that's both a blessing and that's a blessing, and it's just, we're thankful for family, and I'm thankful to have the opportunity to introduce my family. They are a priority to me. They're not just something we show at speaking engagements, but it is our life. We do everything together, and we enjoy it. So, yes, my family. You can sit down, and then Mom's going to speak a little bit. I have to be careful when I give my wife a mic, because I might not get it back. But this is my wife, Nicole.
Sure. So we have a big event coming up.
It's big. It's big.
I think again. There you go.
So we have our first Oklahoma Rising event for the campaign. We actually held our first at the Capitol, which was not campaign related. It was just calling the state together to pray over our pastors and over leaders. And so we held that at the Capitol, but now we're doing them not only as a crusade and a revival, but as a campaign where Jake will get to speak. And so we will have that in Chickasha on September 6th. We have another one planned for Durant. That will be, I believe, October 11th. So those are coming up, and I'll let Jake share a little bit about the vision of that. But if there's any questions that I can answer for you after, I'll be in the back. If you want to donate to the campaign, you can do that online, which I can help you with that, or I can take cash or card or cash or check in the back, but I just have a little thing I need you to fill out for ethics. So any questions I can answer, I will. If not, I'll point you to Jake. Thank you guys again.
So this is our heart. We were called to ministry first. So I was, like I said, born and raised in a Christian home. My mom led me to Christ when I was 6. I just told the story to my daughter the other day, just how I, was riding my bicycle in a back alley, and my friend convinced me to steal a rock from a lady who had a rock collection. And I loved rocks, and I found this gem of a rock. And so I brought it home. Look, Mom, what I found. She's like, oh, you found that, did you? It's not one you typically find. I said, oh yeah, I found it. Well, so later that night, I remember her sitting beside my bed and talking to me about lying and talking to me about sin. And I broke down, I was going, I did it, I lied, I stole and I lied. Then she said, don't worry, because Jesus died for that. And she told me the gospel, how Jesus died on the cross for our sins, and we put our faith and our trust in him, that he washes away all of our sins and casts them as far as the east is from the west. And if you believe that Jesus died on the cross for your sins and rose again and is alive today, commit your heart to him, then he forgives all your sins. And you have confidence that when you die, you go to heaven, spend eternity with him. And so I gave my life to Christ at 6 years old and got baptized at Calvary Baptist Church in Big Spring, Texas, and just was thankful to be raised in not a perfect home, but a home that made Jesus center. And I found that when we do that, he makes all of the imperfections right. It says he makes the crooked places straight. He brings the mountains low and the valleys high. He sets our feet on solid ground. And that's what he does. And so he called me to preach at 14 years old. We were part of a family ministry. We'd go to rodeos and sing Bill Gaither songs. Bill Gaither? So my dad got hooked up on Bill Gaither, and we didn't have TV where we grew up, out in the middle of nowhere, West Texas. And so we just sat and watched Bill Gaither songs all relentlessly. And then we got to a rodeo one Sunday at Cowboy Church, and they said, oh, our musician didn't show up. Anybody have a song they can sing? And my dad volunteered our family, so we got up and sang a Bill Gaither song, and that started the touring of the Merrick family singing group. And so we ended up going to rodeos every weekend and churches as much as we could. It was a neat time, but that really fueled this call for me to preach the gospel. And I pursued that at Dallas Baptist University, did an undergrad in biblical studies. Then went to Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary and got my Master's of Divinity there, and with an emphasis in languages. But nonetheless, I found that, it's so much more than just knowing about God. It's actually knowing him. And that his word is all about pointing us to him, this living relationship. And so that's been our pursuit, my pursuit. And I was so thankful whenever my pursuit of him made me cross paths with the beautiful girl who's on the same pursuit. We met on a blind date. We were married 6 months later because we just sat for 3 hours at Louis over here in Yukon and talked about the call. And we were that's what our lives were about. And we both had come to a place in our life that if we didn't find someone who was just as passionate about the call, we can live without them. But when we found someone who was just as passionate, I said, I'm not sure I can live without that. And so thankfully we got married and coming up on 15 years. It's been quite the journey, as I'm sure all of you have your own journey. But, I'll tell you some more about that. We adopted our oldest out of DHS. And that really planted a seed in our hearts for the brokenness of families across Oklahoma. And when I first walked into DHS headquarters, when we left, I told my wife, I said, I hate this place. It's just full of brokenness, families that have been torn apart, ravaged by drugs, sexual immorality, whatever it may be, the law itself, judicial corruption, and it's just brokenness. And I told my wife, I said, this is the state's solution to a spiritual problem. And this was never intended to be solved by the state, but because the church has abdicated that responsibility, it's left this cesspool that has to be cleaned up. And I still don't believe it's the role and responsibility of the state. There's a lot of work we have to do in that area, and that's one of the reasons I'm in this and I'm passionate about this. But since that day, hearts were broken for families across Oklahoma. And for 13 years, we've been praying for 77 counties. I was asked recently, why aren't you running for your state Senate seat? Why aren't you running for a House seat? They're coming up. Well, it's just not the race. The thing that's in our heart is transformation across 77 counties. We have a vision for the state of Oklahoma that's radically different from what we are experiencing now. It involves maximized freedom to families and the people, healing in families. And we want to see revival. We want to see revival in Oklahoma. And really that's at the heart of what this is about, is we're inviting the community out, not just registered Republicans, we're inviting everybody out. And we want to make it fun with food trucks and car show and giveaways. And I'm going to do a fitness competition. I'm going to do the fittest farmer competition. So we're going to see how quickly we can drive T-posts. And we'll see who's in shape, okay? But we want the whole community to come out, because what we're going to do is we're going to worship. We're going to talk about the greatness of America, but more importantly, the greatness of God who inspired America. And we're going to point people to Jesus and then plug them into church. Then we're going to move on to the next city and do this all across the state of Oklahoma. And of course, we're going to numerous meetings like this, GOP meetings, OK2A meetings, John Birch meetings, no-name meetings with people who are just interested. And we're making many stops. I just got back from Poto, Oklahoma, and Kingfisher, Fairview, and we're going all around the state. But we're going to have select meetings like this where we're inviting them to us. And we're going to hopefully see people born again, register to vote, and get plugged into solid communities as we go on to the next communities. You all are welcome to come. I'd love to see you all out there if you're able to. This is going to be in Chickasha on a man's property out west of town. And he offered it to us. He's enthusiastic about this vision. So he said, use my property however you want to. So we're going to have a car show. We're going to have all the food trucks, giveaways. It'll be a good time. So that's coming up. But this is our heart. We love people. Being in ministry, that's what it's about. It has to be about that. Or you're not going to be in ministry long. And for us, ministry's never been a career. When I graduated seminary, I went and I was preaching, filling the pulpit in a church in South Fort Worth. And they'd been without a pastor for months. And I came in and I filled the pulpit for several weeks. And I felt a connection with the people. I started to love the people. And I told the deacons, I said, I don't know how y'all are feeling, but I have a heart for this place. I would love to come and serve this body. And they were like, well, finish your resume and we'll take a look at it. And I just said, I've been here for how long? You know me. And are you going to compare me to someone else on paper? I just recently graduated. I'm sure there's others that have many years of experience. And are you going to compare me on paper with someone? And so I started asking, where's the Holy Spirit in this? How do we have the Holy Spirit lead us? And I didn't get into this for a career. This was a call. And so I'm not here for a job. I'm here for where God is putting me. Yeah. And so from that day, I thought I would never turn in a resume to a church again. I would only go where God led. And if you didn't open the door, I'm not going. And if he opens the door, I'm going to be there. And that's how I've just operated my ministry, where we've always gone, filling the pulpits, preaching around the state. When we're invited to come, we say, okay, Lord, is this you? And if it is, we're going to go. And that's been our ministry for however many years. Long time before we met, we were doing that. And for the last 15 years, doing it together. But it's never been about a career for me. God stopped me on my steps. I lived in North Fort Worth, and I was walking up the steps to my apartment. I was really kind of frustrated with life because I just graduated from seminary, spent all this time and money earning a master's of divinity, and now I found myself personal training. I got certified to train as a personal trainer, and it was an amazing ministry. But I'm like, I didn't really get a master's in theology to do personal training. Now, this is supposed to be part-time, while we got into a church and planted churches. I'm like, what am I doing? And I'm just kind of frustrated. I was walking up the stairwell to my apartment, and the Lord stopped me halfway up, and he said, will you do what I called you to do if you never get paid for it? And it was a moment that literally stopped me. I knew it was a question from God. And I stopped and I considered it, and I said, yes. How can I do anything else? It's never been about the money. So I resolved at that moment that I would always pursue him and not money. And he's never let us down. He is always faithful. He is always faithful. And so we have done that. We've served in a couple of different churches and found our way back to Oklahoma City. No job, no security. The Holy Spirit was leading us back to Oklahoma City. And we believed that it was on a prayer assignment to go into 77 counties, our prayer groups, to start healing families across the state. So that was the mission. And as we prayed into it, we had a strong burden for the capital. And so we started looking for houses around the capital. We were like, okay, I think God is calling us to move to the capital. But all the houses were like $1 million. We're like, well, maybe he's not calling us, And nothing was fitting there. Then this house opened up out here in northwest Oklahoma City, Surrey Hills and Yukon. And I'm like, well, we thought it was the capital. There was something about the capital. Everything worked out here. We got approved with financing. It was a great little neighborhood, good school district. So we moved out there. And then this burden came to run for Congress, which was foreign because we were on prayer assignment. And then praying for the capital and then praying for the state, suddenly we became burdened to run for office. And so it was undeniable. We prayed about it. God confirmed it. And we entered our name to run for Congress, 5th District. Stephanie Bice ended up winning that seat. And when she was at her watch party, we went to her watch party. I went to her runoff, and at her watch party where they're watching the final vote come in, my wife and I went to a restaurant. We went to her watch party. We left early. We're sitting there watching the votes come in on TV, and Nicole said, so do you think she's going to win? Talking about Bice. I said, I know she's going to win because I'm supposed to run for her seat. She was like, what? I thought we were done with this, But I just knew God had used that first race to prepare us for the second. She indeed won. Vacated her state Senate seat. I ran for that. Another miraculous parting of the waters. We got elected. And I love Nicole's testimony. Come share real quickly what you were praying for and how God answered it. With a closet.
When we started praying for 77 counties, really when we adopted Emmy, and just saw the brokenness. And then when we were in Tulsa, we were driving out to Fairview. There was a couple that had gotten just radically on fire for the Lord. So we were just going all the way from Tulsa to Fairview just to pour into them. Well, there was this prayer going on at the Capitol, and Jake said, I feel like we're supposed to go. And I'm like, I didn't want to go. We've been on the road all day. We had the girls were a lot younger. We didn't have clothes. Like, we were in shorts. It wasn't something we were prepared for. So we stopped off and went and got clothes. We go, and as I'm there, the Lord just began to break me, and really in a deeper place for Oklahoma. And so I just began to pray, Lord, get me in the Capitol to pray. Because see, I believe that we have authority in our prayer life. And so we can go into a place and we can take dominion over that place. And so I'm like, get us in the Capitol, Lord. I don't care if it's a basement, it's a bathroom. Get me in there so I can pray over this place. And not that there's not prayer going on in the Capitol. There is, but there was something that the Lord was birthing in me to go and take my authority there. So we began to pray that. A couple of years goes by. Then we're back in Oklahoma City. Jake said he's got to run. He wants to run. And I was like, you want to what? I'm like, how does this line up with what's in our heart for ministry? I thought we were starting prayer for 77 counties. And so we got down and prayed, and the Lord spoke to my heart, and he said he has to. And so we came out of that. It's like, okay, this is right. And so there was 2 days left for the filing date. We went, took $1,000 we didn't have, and went and filed, and came home, and it hit me what we just did. And I laid down actually sat in the chair in our kitchen, and I began to hyperventilate, which I've never done that before. I'm a pretty easygoing, I don't get stressed out about things, especially when I know the Lord's in it. I was really stressed out. I'm like in tears, my head between my legs, deep breathing. He's just over there laughing, pacing the floor like, okay, God, I trust you, And I just got down on my face and I said, Lord, I know you're calling us to do this, and I will obey you because I trust you and I love you. But you're going to have to give me a heart for this because my heart is not in this. And the Lord over the last 5 years has begun to not only give me a heart, but an understanding as to what we're called to. And so when he was senator, he got he won that seat. And the Lord said to me, you asked me for a bathroom and I'm giving you an office. And so when he was senator, I would take groups in after hours, and we'd hit the Senate floor, we'd hit the House floor, and we would pray. I had youth groups come in, I had churches, I had little prayer, 4 little prayer ladies that they've been praying for 40 years, and they come up. And so that was just our heart. And so now we see this is what you're calling us to. And it's because we understand, and we understand our authority, and we're fully submitted to what God wants for this state. Not a man's agenda, not what we think it should look like, but what God is saying, this is what I want for Oklahoma, and this is what Oklahoma needs. And I truly believe that we will be Oklahoma, and there's been words and prayers that have gone out that Oklahoma will be an example to the nation as to what it's to look like. And I believe this is the one who's supposed to lead us in that.
You need to vote for me just so you get her as a first lady. What she carries is important. Let me flip to this other screen. So these are just some general categories that are important to me. It's a starting point for me to open up some conversation. I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these 5 categories, and then we can discuss it too. I'm going to give you a chance to ask me questions. But this is a call. It is for Oklahoma to rise, and it's the call for the people to step back into your place as the true government of the land, as the true authority. And I truly believe that we send representatives on our behalf so that we can stay home and continue our jobs and care for our families. We send representatives because we don't have time to go up and legislate, but they're supposed to represent us. And when they fail to do that, they need to be replaced because we are the authority. I believe we all will stand accountable before God in the end as to what we did with the freedom he entrusted us with.
Amen.
And he gave us this freedom that is amazing and unique in all of world history. The things that we are able to do and we are blessed to do on a daily basis. And then the question is, okay, what did you do with that? And this is a question that stirs me every single day. If it's one thing that gets me out of bed or keeps me up at night, it's that question of, what did you do with what I gave you? It's the parable of the talents. The man entrusted the man with the talents. And, some of them went off and invested and then brought a return to the master. And then there was the one who hid it underground and then brought back the talents, the same number, back to the master. And says, here, I brought it back to you. He said, you brought back what I gave you? I expected you to increase it, to invest it, to multiply it. And that parable has stirred me so much. I was like, okay, what has he given me? We're so blessed. I mean, I'm convicted all the time about I have access to everything, all information in the palm of my hand. What am I doing with that? What am I doing with that? And so it is the call for Oklahoma to rise, all of us, the people to rise, and I want to rise in all of these areas. Rising in health, access to health care, overall health in our schools, health in our children, mental health. I want to rise, obviously, in education. It's the talk of the town. It's what everybody focuses on. Obviously, it's needed. I mean, we're somewhere around the bottom. I don't really trust the latest poll that says we're at 50th because it came from Wallet Hub. And I'm like, so what does Wallet Hub know about education? But nonetheless, we're somewhere near the bottom. It's not good enough. I think we should be somewhere around the top. And we should have no excuses. That should be it. And I want to see us rise in education, rise in data security. We're in a technological age where data is gold, and your personal data is being sought after. And we need to make sure it's protected. My child's data, your children and grandchildren, their data, it is being sought after, and we need to make sure that's protected here in Oklahoma. It's a priority of mine. And then protection of property, dealing with eminent domain, dealing with property taxes, these kinds of things to protect our personal property are very important. And then rising in prosperity, something that we all can agree on, that we want to have a prosperous nation. We as individuals want to be prosperous. And so I'm going to touch on each of these points. But the main point is it's going to require the people to rise. And it's going to require the church to rise. I believe in limited government. I believe that government must stay in its lane. I don't want an invasive, overreaching government, whether it's the federal government or the state government. We always talk about the federal government. Everybody gets hung up on D.C., but the things that impact us most directly are right here in the state of Oklahoma, right in your own community or county. And so even in your own community or county, I don't want them in my business or in your business. And so we must keep government in its lane. And the only way to do that is for the people to rise. I don't know if I tell this story a lot, but it was a meme that really captured my attention, and I should have sent it to you. I may have it handy here. If I send it to you, could you put it up there? You're like, sure. Yeah, let me see if I can find it real quickly. I won't waste your time somewhere there. But it is a meme of a picture of the half-circle politicians, and they're sitting there with their cigars and their bourbon, and they're playing a game. There's a board game in front of them. And when you look closer, the game is sitting on the backs of men who are bent over. And I love the caption because it says, as soon as they stand up, the game is over. And that's what it's about, right? I mean, really, I don't like victim mentalities. I find myself sometimes getting in a victim mentality. Oh, woe is me. If only they would do this, and if only they would do that. And then I have to remember who I am and what God made me to do and the freedom he's entrusted me with and the power and the authority. And I've got to let that victim mentality fade away and say, okay, no, I'm going to be accountable for what God gave me, the responsibility he gave me. I find I take responsibility for my own health. So as we talk about healthcare, when I graduated seminary, I got plugged into an internship that was taking me on a path of church planting. That was really in my heart to do, is go into unchurched areas and start churches where there's no churches. But as you're starting a church, you also have to eat and pay the bills. So you have to be bivocational, unless you're just independently wealthy. I wanted something that I was still working with people. So I looked at things like nursing, massage therapy. I ended up doing personal training because fitness was always I was always passionate about that and helping people get healthy. So I became a personal trainer. Did that for 12 years. I was in incredible ministry. But in that process of helping people, I learned a lot about health and teaching people about personal responsibility. I believe in self-governance, that in order to have maximized freedom, you must have self-governance. Yep. And I believe self-governance exists where there is a fear of God. So we start to see how they're all connected. We need revival, so there's a return of the fear of God that causes us to self-regulate. Yeah. That we do what is right because it is right, and because we'll stand before God, not necessarily because there's a law telling us we can or we can't. There may not be a law about it, and you may be able to go do it. Doesn't mean you should. So, I don't beat my wife. because there's a law about it, right? I do it because I love her. I mean, I don't beat my wife. I love her. Is this being recorded? So self-governance. And so obviously as a personal trainer, I'm working with people constantly. For the years I did that on self-governance. I was mean. I know I sound nice, but I was mean sometimes whenever I'm on the treadmill and I like start cranking up the incline. This person's like dying over here and I'm pushing them. Or when I have meetings and I'm talking to people I'm training and I'm helping them lose weight and I have meetings and there's a table full of donuts in the middle. And no, so I was mean because I wanted them to face the temptation and overcome it. To have that self-will to say no, whether I'm there or not. And so that's what I mean by self-governance, is to regulate yourself. That's why John Adams said that our Constitution was written only for a moral and religious people. It's wholly inadequate for the governance of any other. Our Constitution does not work where there isn't a moral and religious people. Well, what is a moral and religious people? It's one that fear God. And they have a certain moral code that they live by, regardless of what the government says. I believe in that self-governance. Now, so I'm all about the MOHA and the MAHA movement, the Make America Healthy Again, Make Oklahoma Healthy Again. I don't know if you saw, I'm thinking about all these things I should have sent you now, Chris. No, there's the meme there. I think it's pretty powerful. Let me see it again. Thinking of all these things I should have sent Chris the show now. I don't know if you guys have seen the video of JFK.
Working out.
Now, the Lost Sierra is what it was, his Lost Sierra project. And he ended up getting it in over 200 public schools. And man, are you able to play a YouTube video, Chris? See if you can find JFK and Lost Sierra. And now you can see a glimpse of this. It just blows your mind. Because what he did, he said it's a matter of national security, of getting our kids healthy and fit. And so he instituted this program in high schools across the nation. You had young men, you had gymnasiums full of young men that were doing some crazy workouts. You'd think this is a military camp, but no, it was just a public school. Just a public school. So I'll see if we can find it real quick before going into it too much, because it kind of speaks for itself. But I would love to see that in Oklahoma. You know, fitness, there's a reason this day there's a big emphasis on fitness. We have gone so far away and we are so unhealthy. Not only in America, but especially in Oklahoma. Actually, in Oklahoma, we are at the bottom of the barrel, not just in education, but in health. We are leading the nation when it comes to heart disease and diabetes and these kinds of things, which are usually completely preventable. But we have been, the food we eat is not really food. And so we eat things every single day that's actually destroying us. So I'm thankful for RFK. I'm thankful for what he's doing. It's great, removing the toxins and the dyes and these kinds of things from food. But here's the thing, whether he does that or not, we can still make those changes. It doesn't have to be a law to do what's right. And so we take responsibility. We start eating healthy. We start taking care of ourselves, teaching our kids how to do the same. And we have a whole new generation then that we're raising up. You know, it's amazing. Fitness is what they call a keystone habit. A keystone habit is something when you change it, you have to change multiple other things in order for this to change. So if you decide you're going to start working out, it changes the time you go to bed. It changes what time you wake up, what you eat for dinner, what you eat for breakfast, the kind of people you hang out with, your routine after work, where you put your running shoes. It changes everything. And so I believe that if we put an emphasis on that in our public schools, and I was actually working on that when I was in the Senate, a bill that would require fitness assessments, just really health assessments on our kids. Not an exercise program or anything like that, because that was going to be too big of a haul. But I just wanted to reintroduce a health assessment. And of course, that didn't get passed because of political drama. But I think we need that. And then also the presidential fitness test that Trump is pushing, doing that, teaching our kids this, I believe it would help a lot of things like ADD and ADHD. You know, the ability for our kids to sit and focus and learn their self-confidence when they're strong and they're fast and they can do physical things. I mean, there's so many other areas it impacts it. So I think we could have an improvement in our academic performance just by focusing on our health and fitness of our children. I don't ever hear it being talked about with regard to improving education, but I think it's a very important aspect of it. And then, of course, the end healthcare dilemma that we have, the cost of healthcare. I mean, how are we going to solve that? Through self-governance. We start there. This is why, like, when I talk, I'm not coming with a lot of solutions. I don't have a Superman syndrome. I call it a Superman syndrome, where I'm saying, here's how I'm going to save the day. In some ways, it's like, no, that's not the role of government. That's your responsibility. You start getting on a walking routine and stop eating donuts and things like that. That helps with the healthcare. But we want to again, JFK, right? Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And this is one of those things that we can do.
Jake, there's 3 Mars.
Okay, let's see. That's not the one I was thinking of. So let's do JFK La Sierra.
How do you spell that?
LA space SIERRA. La Sierra. Yeah.
Oh, wait, just keep talking.
Okay. Now we're all waiting. So, but here's the other thing is how do we improve healthcare access, especially in rural Oklahoma? So like I just went out to Poto, Oklahoma and Fairview, Oklahoma, and you get out there and there's these big questions about, how do we get healthcare out here? And I believe, once again, one of the ways we can do that is get government out of healthcare. Actually, the churches started hospitals. You had Dallas, you had Baptist Hospital, Methodist Hospital, Lutheran Hospital, Catholic hospitals. It was the church that said, we need to care for the sick. So they started hospitals. And then the government got involved and the church backed out. And we have what we have today with these extremely high prices, governed essentially by insurance. And thankfully, there's a movement to self-correct that within the industry. And if there's any medical professionals in here, I'd love to hear from you as well. But I know there's a surgery center here in Oklahoma City. And you go to their website, and it has all of the different surgeries that they perform and their prices. Just like shopping, you know exactly what you're going to pay. How beautiful would that be? I mean, right now it's kind of like the IRS. Like, you owe us something, but we're not going to tell you. If you get it wrong, you're going to be penalized. I can't wait for the external revenue service, so we can do away with the IRS altogether.
Yeah.
But that's a different story. But with our health care, it's being dictated and governed by the insurance companies. And it's really not about you and your health. It's not about improving your health. It's about funding the system, and it's about maintaining your sickness. It's a sick care system. So we have to do better on an individual basis, but I want to see more independent hospitals, independent surgery centers, and I believe whenever we remove the red tape and get government out of their business, it's like with any other business. When you keep money in their pockets, they're going to reinvest in their own business. They're going to hire more people and expand and meet real needs. We don't need the government for that. There was a recent bill that was passed this last year concerning nurse practitioners. Are there any nurse practitioners here? No? Okay. It was a bill on nurse practitioners, and what it did was remove the requirement for them to pay a physician for oversight. So previously, they would have to pay a monthly fee to a physician for oversight. The ones I spoke with had never even seen their physician. It was a complete formality. They sent a check of $2,500, $3,000 a month to a physician, and they really didn't do anything. And so they were saying this is an unneeded cost. And so there was a bill that passed this year that removed that burden, and after 3 years of practice, then the nurse practitioner would no longer have to pay that to a supervising physician. So that bill passed in Oklahoma. And so I asked the nurse practitioner afterward, I said, so what are you going to do now that you're not having to pay $3,000 a month to a supervising physician? And she was so excited. She's like, we're going to hire more people. We're going to expand more out of rural Oklahoma where there's a real need. And she said, we're actually going to open up some new clinics dealing with mental health. We're getting into some new areas where we can prescribe some low-level medications for things like depression. For me, it was like, this is what happens when you let the free market work. When the government gets out of the way and lets them keep their own money, they're going to invest in themselves, and they're going to go meet real needs better than the government ever could. So how do we improve healthcare and healthcare access? There may be many ways, but I think that's one way, is getting out of their way. Reducing red tape, reducing the tax burden so they can grow their businesses. I'm kind of going into one of my other points of rising in prosperity, but it deals with lowering the tax burden and the red tape. I personally did pretty good this year in business. I have a construction company. We build metal buildings. Me and my nephew are in business together. And then I help manage my dad's tool company. We have Merrick Tool. You have to check that out sometime. Merrick Tool. We just built the largest impact wrench in the world. And so for years we used the Ingersoll Rand 599. It was 599 pounds. It's a big boy. Produced 80,000 foot-pounds of torque. But we found in some instances, like when you go to a nuclear plant or an electric power plant, they weren't big enough to unscrew some of these big fasteners. Oh, we built a bigger one. 1,600 pounds, 250,000 foot-pounds of torque, and it'll flip over a truck. It's not a lot of power. But that's how I was raised. I was raised by an entrepreneur. one that was always thinking about solutions to problems, and that's how I'm geared. I love it. But we did better this year financially, and I made a little bit more than I did last year. And so I went into a new tax bracket. So what happened is I had this extra money I made, and then I gave it back to the government. Not because I'm that generous. They actually made me.
Yeah.
They made me.
Good. Okay.
And so I'm not a fan of taxes. Raise your hand if you're a fan of taxes. I went up to Poto this last week, and I found a lady that was a fan of taxes.
Really?
She was seething that I was opposed to taxes. Turns out she was a Democrat, so that explains it. I don't understand that mentality. I mean, we started the Revolutionary War over taxes. So I would like to see, obviously, lower taxes. I've been saying that I would like to see, if I had a magic wand, I would love to move to a consumption tax. So you end the property tax, you end the income tax, the corporate tax, and you move to a consumption tax.
Sure.
I like this. You do have a higher percentage tax at the register, but you're not paying all these other taxes. The beautiful thing for me, though, is all voluntary. You get to decide if and when and how much you pay. And rich people pay more taxes because they buy more things. Poor people buy fewer things, so they pay fewer taxes. And that's why they call it a fair tax model. I like it. It's been debated and discussed for years with not much traction, but I think it's a viable option. In the meantime, I would love to end property tax. You know, we're here at this one, rising in prosperity. You know, I talked about improving our health, some ideas there. Rising in prosperity, how do we do that? I think a great way to do that is obviously ending the forced rent on something you own. Once you own something, you should never be threatened of being taken away by the government.
That's right.
So I believe it's unjust. So I start there. When I'm talking about legislation and laws, what is just and what is not just? So we want just laws because the Bible says where the righteous rule, the people rejoice. So the righteous ruling are those who pursue just laws that are good for the people. And I believe that property tax is not good for the people. Now, the immediate question is, obviously, how is this going to fund education? That's the wrong place to start. The right place to start is what is right. And let's do what is right, and then let's see how much money we have. And then we do what we need to do with the money we have. But we don't say, oh, we need extra money, so we're going to go steal some. Any of us would be thrown in jail for it, but the government does it all the time. Oh, we need some extra money. We'll steal some. And we just in Grady County voted down, it wasn't in my area, but it was next door to us, part of Grady County. They wanted to bring in a Mid-America Vote Tech Center. Now, I'm a huge fan of vote tech centers. Huge fan. I'd love to see more of them. But there was an effort to quadruple the property tax to do that. Quadruple the property tax. It was voted down. Thankfully. But that's where, I mean, it can happen any day. If we're not vigilant, if we're not aware, then suddenly we wake up and our property tax is quadrupled. And thankfully in that part of the county, the word got out and they were aware. But man, in many parts of the county, people are asleep. Many parts of the states. They'll wake up and find their property tax is quadrupled. So I don't think that, even though I love vote tax, I'm not in favor of quadrupling property tax to get it.
Right.
Especially when we have billions of dollars in a reserve in the state. So I want to see real tax reform. I don't think what we saw this last session in the Senate or in the legislature, that wasn't real tax reform. That was a way to tell the people that we did something without really doing something. And that happens all the time.
Yes, it does.
You know, we have a problem. I'm going to jump over to property protection here, the bottom. The Chinese can still own land in Oklahoma. There was a bill that was put forth, and it was a good conservative bill, but they took it behind the curtain, and they made a nice little loophole in there, and they brought it back and passed it. So it says that you cannot own land in Oklahoma unless you're an Oklahoma resident, or you intend to become a resident.
Someday.
Well, that defeats the whole bill. But they can come out and say, well, we passed a bill to protect Oklahoma land. And that's what's on all the mailers. Please, if you haven't already heard, just throw away mailers. They're absolute lies. Right after Senate was over, after the session was over this time, mailers went out with several different legislators' names on them, praising them for the good work on these particular bills. And they listed the bill number and then what the bill did, and all of the bill numbers were wrong. It was absolute garbage. But what they're intending, what they're counting on is the people being ignorant or lazy enough not to check it. And all they want to see is, congratulations to this senator or this representative. Just absolute garbage. Dark money is alive and well. It's been dinged. It's been cracked a little bit, but it's still alive and well. And so that's something that obviously I'm going to face in this race, the millions of dollars that's going to be spent on who knows how many flyers and mailers going out. I just tell people throw it away because it's going to be garbage. But bills like that one that claim to have protected property when actually they did not. And there was a pro-life bill that I voted against. I got a lot of flack for voting against pro-life bills, but there was a bill that was proposed by the pro tem of the Senate when I was in there. It was a great bill. But it said, except for the life and the health of the mother. One call, the life and the health of the mother. Well, health can be defined very loosely.
Yes.
So if they say, I don't feel well, or I feel like I might kill myself if I have a baby. Well, no, she can abort it. But all you're going to see in the mailer is Jake voted against this pro-life bill. That's what the general public will see. And so that's why I spend a lot of time. My wife was like, you gotta talk shorter. But I do it intentionally because I want you to thoroughly know who I am. I don't want to come here with a bunch of talking points that are on mailers, pro-2A, pro-life. We can talk about that all day. We need to get to the meat of it. And I don't know about you, but for me, if it takes all night, let's do it. I think it's that important. I'm not going to keep you all night. Yeah. But when I come here, I'm ready to deal with the issues. And I want you to know who I am. I had somebody the other day tell me, you don't like vote. And I'm like, do you know what I stand for? I'm honestly not asking for you to vote if you don't know who I am. I want you to make an educated vote. So these are some things. I want you to know who I am and what I really stand for. I believe we must protect property. You know, the OTA is out of control. When they can just arbitrarily raise tolls without legislative checks, they just raise the toll. Well, the toll is voluntary. You don't have to choose to drive that toll road, but it is a tax. A toll, a tax, a charge. And so I want to see the OTA have more legislative oversight, more checks and balances. But also, they decided to build a toll road and take people's land through eminent domain. And the ones that have challenged, of course, they're supposed to give a fair market value for whatever land they take. But the ones who have challenged that in court, on average, got 6 times more than what the OTA offered them. So, but then, of course, you got to pay that to the attorney that you hired. So we've got to do some heavy regulations on the OTA because they are threatening property. When I think about property protection, I'm so glad that we passed, I think it was House Bill 1128 or 1178, Private Property Protection Act. Did y'all hear about it? So basically, last year, if someone was on your property who was threatening you or your family or your property, and you walked out with a gun, going to leave, you could go to jail.
Right.
Thankfully, they passed that this year. It should have been passed a lot quicker, but thankfully we got it passed. So that now you can brandish your weapon, force someone off of your property, use lethal force if necessary, and you're covered by law.
Good.
That's right? That's a just law. Last year, we did not have that protection. So I'm asking the question, how else am I not covered in the reddest state in the union?
Right.
Exactly. 5-year effort in our conservative Oklahoma legislature. So, got some problems we got to correct. And I want to speak briefly in just a minute on the structure of our legislature. I talk about that everywhere I go. It's upside down, and it's preventing good laws like this from getting passed. But concerning private property, eminent domain is a big concern of mine. Property tax is a big concern of mine. Did you have that video? I'm going to come back to property here in a second because the end of this video here. I want you to see this talking about education.
Had a classical sense
We don't play all of that.
of what it took to move the body well, without injury, with mastery of movement and control.
To those of us who remember John Kennedy, he affected our lives dramatically. He had a vigor, he had a youth, he had an energy. He took La Sierra High School and made that the poster child of his program to make America a healthy place, because he understood that if America was healthy, physically healthy, it would be mentally, spiritually, emotionally, patriotically healthy.
I welcome this opportunity to speak to the people of America about a subject which I believe to be most important, and that is the subject of physical fitness. And I speak not only as President of the United States, but also as a parent of 2 children who I hope will grow up with those qualities of vigor and energy which we identify with the best of America. This should be a matter of concern to us all. A country is as strong really as its citizens. And I think that mental and physical health, mental and physical vigor go hand in hand. That we will not find a day in the United States when all of us are spectators except for a few who are out on the field. I hope all Americans will be on the field. This is a subject which should be of interest to us all.
It is possible.
Are you going to be a spectator or are you going to be on the field? I love that. Isn't that impressive? I mean, what if this was Oklahoma's high schools?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm telling you, we would the grades.
She has a boy going into the 8th grade. And because he plays baseball outside in private teams, but because he's not actively involved in any sport at the school, he was not even allowed to choose that as an elective. So the only kids that are allowed to choose any type of physical sport at this is in Yukon schools, are those that are already on a team. So you have these kids that, like our daughter Emmy, who needs physical fitness for her mental health, is never going to be on a team because she's not coordinated. That's not her gift. She's an artist. She's a piano player, but she still needs that for her mental health. She doesn't. If she was to get a Yukon Public Schools, that wouldn't even be an option to her.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and we've seen for our daughter firsthand, who came from a very traumatic background before she came to us, that she's still wrestling with today. So we understand the need for mental health, but we also understand, the benefit exercise has given her and healthy eating has given her. And when we take things like food dyes out of her diet, how all of a sudden she gets mental clarity. Just getting enough sleep helps her with her mental clarity. Your physical health will dramatically impact your mental capabilities. And so this will help us in our school system. Absolutely it will. Since we're on this topic, let's jump over to education and how we improve. That's one way, is by introducing health and fitness and prioritizing that. But what does that also do? Discipline, talking to teachers around the state about what's most concerning to them. It's usually two things: pay and discipline. Those two things. And so let me address those. First of all, concerning discipline. Well, first of all, if you taught young men and women things they're not getting at home, because again, the root issue is the home. And that's where the church comes in. We need to be a more evangelical church, going out and witnessing and pointing people to Jesus and loving on them and bringing them into and discipling them and teaching parents how to be parents. Yeah. Emmy, our oldest, we adopted her. And what she went through the first 3 years of her life was horrendous. But what we learned was her mom also went through that. Her mom was a victim of the system, and it was a cycle. And so we have to teach young parents how to be parents, things they're not going to get from home. And so that's, I believe, where the church comes in. But when it comes to classrooms, we have to give teachers authority over their own classrooms. I believe in local control, right? Starting with self-governance, but in the classroom, give the teacher that authority to say, the student is unruly, get out. You have to be able to remove them from the classroom, but because when that student leaves, so does the money, oftentimes they're forced to bring that student back in. And now it disrupts the learning environment for the whole class. Yeah. So we need to give teachers that authority to remove children who cannot or will not learn. The question then is, why is this happening in this student? And then what kind of services should we have at public schools to meet that need? Public schools are for education. That need needs to be met, but not necessarily in the schoolhouse. Right. Okay, we can have a nurse to put a Band-Aid if they fall down or to help them, but we're not looking for comprehensive medical care at the school. Right. Okay, I'm not a fan of these clinics that are wanting to move it to the school. I'm not a fan of wraparound services in our public school. Public education needs to be focused on reading, writing, arithmetic, not all of these other peripheral issues. And I want to give teachers authority over their own classrooms. And then I want to help with their pay, not by requesting more from the legislature. They're already getting half the state budget. But where that money is going is the big question. And it looks like a big portion of it is going to administration. So with over 500 school districts in the state, with 17 of those making over $250,000 a year, 4 of those making over $400,000 a year, I've got questions. Yeah. How much of this is going to the classroom? How much of this is going to the teacher? It seems like we have the money. It's just not making it where it needs to go. You know, there was a bill that was attempted to be passed. Trey Caldwell carried it in the House last year. And the goal was to require 60% of educational funding go to the classroom. They couldn't get it out of committee. So they whittled it down to 50%. Can we get 50% of appropriated educational funding to go to the classroom? And it wouldn't pass committee. So we're asking the question, where is the priority here? Is it actually on the classroom and the teachers and the students, or is it administration? It seems like it's administration, and here's what I've been saying. If this is producing blue ribbon A+ schools, nobody's gonna complain, you know? We're paying them $400,000 a year. Okay, but they're producing blue ribbon schools. Keep it going. But they're not. They're failing. They're failing school districts. So we've got to rethink all of that. I think those are 2 areas where I would start, is administrative bloat and empowering teachers in their own classroom. I think those coupled with prioritizing health and fitness and overall discipline, we're going to see an improvement in education. Did I cover all those? I may have covered them. I think I did. Okay. I'm gonna stop, take a breath, and let you ask a question. Y'all have any questions for me? Yes, please.
Just want to warn everyone, fall may like fall. So anyway, a quick JVS commercial, or you don't mind, has done this for years. It's called a scorecard for both Congress and the state legislators. I'm patting it back for you, Jake, because you had 100% in 2021. You don't mind taking a senator, 36 rating, you might as well be a Democrat. So check the JVS scorecards, see what your legislators doing. And I tell you what, Jake, one of the disagreement, we don't have a conservative GOP. We have a violent GOP. And I'm voting for you because I think you have the leadership and the colonies to do the job.
Thank you.
On the will, I'll take the category of rising and property protection. What you need to do also, instead of that, make a little wheel so that someone from the audience can spin the wheel. And then you can just switch the topics. I like it. So keep that. Policing for profit. Police departments and sheriff's departments across Oklahoma. The Institute of Justice still gives Oklahoma a D- for civil asset forfeiture. That is theft.
Right.
That's property protection.
That's good.
The legislature needs to do something about it, and they haven't done that for years.
That's good. Yeah. Thank you. 100%. I mean, I can't. It's very good.
Yeah.
You just said. Yes, sir.
I just have a question about property. Can't speak to it, so I'm just asking if there's any merit to it. I've seen occasional several articles online talking about federal government wants to remove homeowners from their property and just take over property ownership. Is there any merit, any truth to that?
But is it through the eminent domain? Is that what they're referring to? Or
I have to confess, there were headlines I didn't have.
Okay.
Is this real?
yeah, I mean, obviously, if you don't pay your property tax, then that's a real thing. Yeah, and the loss of your property, which is a shame. And of course, we're seeing farms and ranches being sold or being taken because they're not able to keep up with property tax alone. I mean, I spoke with a farmer up in Fairview last week, and he was talking about just the struggle. He said, we deal with millions of dollars a year just to make a few thousand. And they farm thousands of acres of land, all different kinds of crops and cattle. And he said, we're operating on razor-thin margins. And then what would happen if you relieved that property tax off of farmers and ranchers? Now, to that point, though, I believe that there is probably a reason to keep property tax with corporations. That corporations who own property in areas, so we keep that portion of the property tax. That's the cost of doing business, is being on this property. That's something to look at there. But as far as individual ownership of property, it definitely is happening. And so is the eminent domain, the seizure of property. And so I hope that answers your question.
Well, it answers the question as best it can for a person who didn't agree with it.
Yeah. Blue Page, you have a question? He has a microphone on there too.
I'm concerned about when you get elected, about the people you have to appoint to your cabinet, because here's the thing, if we don't have the first term done correctly, they're going to, you already know this, Jake, they're going to try to eat you up alive.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's a concern for me. And also, how we get Doge in Oklahoma. I know that it's eventually going to come, but with you in office, that's something that I would like to see, because there is no accountability. I've already talked to Ryan about all the fat in education and everything, and yet we haven't seen anything, but of course they're eating him up alive too right now. Oh, yeah. But anyway, can you address those two things?
So the appointments are so critical. And I remind people all the time that I don't have to be an expert in every field. You have to know the people who are the experts in those fields. And so the appointments are critical. And that's why Trump is so successful right now in his second term, is he learned a lesson. He brought in the right people from the get-go. He struggled in the first term, constantly firing people and getting new people, but he knew exactly who he needed going into it, put them in place, and I think they've been doing a stellar job. Yeah. So I'm excited about that, because I've already been making a list of people that I'm like, I want this person here, over energy, over DHS, because I know that these are the people who would stand on their principles and convictions. They wouldn't be pushed around by the establishment, and they would do what was righteous. That's what I'm looking for. And so most definitely that is important. And the second part of your question,
was getting Doge into.
Yeah. It seems like it's more of a dodge right now than a doge. And so, you uncover something, that's step one. Step two is doing something about it.
Right.
And it seems like there's a big reluctance to cut anything. Like we uncover it, it makes headlines, and then it's like, but what happened with that?
Yeah.
And so we have to, as he said, have the cojones to do something, to actually take action. Now, what's required to take action? Let me tell you what's required is you cannot be thinking about re-election. And so I'm going to run for the first 4 years without regard to the next term. I'm going to campaign with a message that may be controversial, but I don't care because if you elect me, you know what you're getting. And so that's the way I operated when I was in the Senate. That's why I voted against the school voucher bill when I knew it was a death knell in the political coffin. I didn't like the voucher bill because it allowed the government to audit 10% of those that took the money. So that's what they call the camel's nose under the tent. When the nose gets under the tent, the whole camel's not far behind. And so if they're auditing 10% of public money, which they should, transparency and accountability, but I said they're most definitely going to find some kind of indiscretion there, some kind of mismanagement of funds, which then is going to say we should audit 25%.
Yeah.
No, well, we should probably audit 50%. How long before they're just auditing everybody who took any money from the government because it's not really your money, it's their money, they're giving it back to you with the strings. So I just saw this coming. I'm like, at one little provision that they could audit 10% of those who took the money, that's a no-go for me. It wasn't just give the money back to the people get to decide where to send their kids. No, we're going to follow you and make sure you do it the way we want you to do it. So for that reason, I voted no, in spite of tremendous political pressure to vote yes. I was the deciding vote in that killed it. And I don't regret it. I think what we have now with the tax credit is a better system, not ideal in any way, but it's better than the voucher. So I proved in that time in the Senate that I'm willing to sacrifice a career for what's right. And they recruited my opponent, raised up the money, and got me out. And I told this story, I can't remember if I told it here or not, but I was there on the floor talking to a fellow senator who's also conservative, and he didn't like the bill either. But he said, if I vote against this, I'm going to draw an opponent. And so we're sitting there talking, and I'm telling him why I'm voting no on it. And he gets courage, and he goes and he votes no. And then, beep, his cell phone goes off. He looks at it. His face goes white. He said, I just drew an opponent. That quick. And then he changed his vote to yes. That said everything to me. That was one of the biggest lessons I learned in the Senate, is you have to be willing to die. You have to be willing to die, to give it up. This is what's right, regardless of what that means. I'm going to do what's right today. And so that's what I'm going to bring as governor, is I'm going to do what's right. It's wrong to take people's money. It's wrong for what we're seeing with the solar industries and the windmill industries, all these things just railroading through our farmland, all because of a climate change agenda. And saying the world is going to end? No, I don't believe it. And I would want to do an immediate moratorium on that, to get pause on all green energy projects, to protect people's lands, to protect our environment, to protect our oil and gas industry, all of these kinds of things. We have to have someone who's willing to fight for what is right, to sacrifice their political career. It's not about the re-election. You said that they're going to come after me in the next 4 years. They're already coming after me. They've already been coming after me. I know that's part of the game. It's part of the fight. We just trust God in the process. In the back. Yes, sir.
I'll tell you what, you could probably be my twin brother. Everything you're saying is exactly what I have said. I teach, most of you know now, that I substitute in the high school last year about every day. And discipline problem was the problem.
Yep.
Luckily, I would pick and choose the classes I wanted. So I knew what teachers disciplined and what didn't. And that's the classes I took. Now the vouchers, my wife had said, oh, you need to get those vouchers so the kids can go anywhere they want. I keep telling her the vouchers, the government really wants it because they can control the private schools. And that's exactly what you're saying. Everything I agree with. I went to college for industrial arts, so VOTEC is my deal.
Oh, yeah. We love
Thank you.
We love Boateng. Yes. Get a mic because I want everybody to.
Are you thinking of maybe after you're done with governor, maybe thinking of becoming president?
Don't give me any ideas. I am letting the Lord lead. However, wherever I was tucking her in after we ran for Congress, we were now into a state senate race, and I was tucking her in, and I said she wanted me to lay down with her and tell her a story and things like that. I said, "Baby, I gotta go. I'm gonna go spend some time in prayer." And she's like, "Great." And she was like 5 years old. I'm like, "Oh, great." I'm like, "What?" Like, every time you go pray, we go do something crazy, like run for Congress.
But not listening closely enough, because I was interacting with potential Republicans successfully. But he was talking about Senate Bill 20. I believe that has to do with not giving illegal driver's license in Oklahoma. Is that correct?
Yes.
He said he worked with Kendall Sakieri to get that passed. Can you talk about that?
Yes, you bet. Well, that was introduced when I was in the Senate. Senator Brooks, a Democrat, carried that, and I invited him into my office to lay it out, and I think that his intention behind it was good, honestly. He was saying that we have a ton of uninsured illegal immigrants here in the state, and so it's a problem. So if you get hit by one of those, they're uninsured, and they may run off, or if they're caught, good luck paying for your car. And so that is a problem that has to be addressed, but not in favor of giving driver's license to illegal immigrants. And so, like I said, that was really introduced when I was there. That was a vote I regret missing. We had to go down to Dallas. Nicole had a heart appointment down in Dallas. I'm always there with her heart appointments. So we went down there and they voted on that the day I was gone. But I wanted to be on record voting against that. I most certainly would have voted against it. But that has been the fight. We're going to see it again this next year as well. They're going to keep pushing it until they get it passed. And usually it's going to be in some kind of form. That's how it works. It'll be some kind of watered down form that then they can bring back, and it's easier to add a little bit to it. No, not that I know of. Not that I know of. Double check me on that. I'm pretty sure it did not pass. Does anybody have? Well, with the law would allow them to. The law would allow, if passed, the law would allow them to get driver's license.
We could keep up with them.
Right, right.
Getting a license.
No, I don't think so either. I think that's just one more step towards amnesty and allowing them to stay, because it's just these boxes they check. It's like, well, we've already given them driver's license, we might as well let them do this. So we just little by little allow them to be fully integrated without ever becoming legal citizens.
Right.
So that's my problem with it. We need to go ahead and have them take all the steps back and get their citizenship.
Yes.
As heartbreaking as it is, with those who have been here 30 years, working a job, starting a company, their family is settled, they got kids and grandkids, but in the end, in the very beginning, you broke the law. And it's hard. It's hard. And maybe there's a way to work with that as far as issuing visas, but there needs to be some kind of legal process where they get vetted and have legal allowance to be here in the States, not just turning a blind eye and saying, well, they've been here for 30 years, they pay taxes. I've been saying, so if you robbed a bank, but you're paying taxes, you're good? No, it doesn't work that way. So I don't really care if you're paying taxes or not, if you broke the law. So let's take them back to the starting point, get it right there. Possibly, like I said, the work visas, where if they have a proven track record, we can keep them here, because it would do damage to our economy. I mean, this is why Trump, he's gung-ho to send them all back, but then he took a step back and said, hold on, we can't send them all back. It's going to crush our farms out in California. And it's just the reality of it. And so we've got to really think through this. I'm all about rule of law, protecting our borders. I know Trump is too. But even he had to take a step back and say, hold on, we can't just deport them all, because it will actually do us damage. So we got to think through that. I think that by issuing some extra work visas to get some of the select ones in and keep them stable. I know of some crews right now that were cut in half just recently because they were sent back. They cannot finish the job they're on. So the person who paid that contractor to finish they're not going to get their house finished on time. Yeah, they would have to have a clean record. Of course, that is a relationship with the federal government. But that prolongs that process and all those other checks and balances that has to happen. I think that is a viable option there, to give work visas, to keep some of them here. The ones that are hard workers, we don't want, if they have records of DUIs and things like that, that might be a no-go. We need to send them back. But the ones that have a proven record of peace and hard work, keep them here. And then I believe they should also immediately step into a program where they're working towards citizenship. If they're going to stay here, they can't just keep on doing what they're doing. They actually have to enter a program where they are learning English and they are, becoming legal citizens.
Jake, I promise you also, once they get driver's license, the next step is voting.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I mean, we've already seen that in the liberal states, right? And it's all incremental, those incremental moves.
Yeah, it'll last.
Let's go here. He hadn't asked one yet.
Oh, yeah.
On education, I hear that Oklahoma is at the bottom of the educational
Ranking.
It bothers me because I know excellent teachers and some brilliant students, and it bothers me greatly. Steps need to happen.
Yeah.
It sounds like some kind of evaluation of our priorities.
100%. Again, about education, what can be done about it. Like I said, I think two good starting points are looking where the money is going, that is funding the education, giving teachers authority over their own classrooms so that the ones that are disturbing it can be removed and you have a better focused classroom environment. I think that would be helpful. Improving health and fitness is going to help with focus and discipline. So those are some components. Going back to Lupe's thought about appointments, the governor then appoints those members of the school board, and those are very important appointments, obviously, like we're seeing, right, with all the controversy around the school board and their relationship with the superintendent. And so to have those right appointments in the school board, and what we're seeing too is those people that not only will do what is right, but we have to make some progress. We've got to be able to work with whoever's in there. And, it's just it's a very interesting situation right now with the superintendent and the school board members, and they're constantly butting heads and fighting. In my opinion, it's like as long as they're fighting each other, they're not really fighting for the students. Right. And so I'd like to see them working in a concentrated effort, concerted efforts for the students to improve it instead of trying to get one up on each other. Yeah. And I want to see that go away. So those appointments to the school board is very important. And then I think another part is on the people to elect the right superintendent. I'm not giving an opinion on Ryan Walters. I'm just saying that's an important role that's elected by the people. Exactly. And also, too, I've heard this bit of insight concerning the statistics is that the difference between like 20th and 50th is minimal. And again, it depends on what study you're looking at. And so we might be 50th, but it's maybe just a very small difference between those that are ranked higher. I think you look at the global situation, and I'm not sure we're there competing with India and China when it comes to math and science. So I think we need to look at the global situation, not just where we rank within the nation. But you can't overlook the importance of reading. Just being able to teach a kid how to read. We made that a priority. We homeschool our girls, and we made it a priority to teach them how to read early on. And then, so later on when they got older, I told my wife, I have no concerns about them because they can read anything, and they have the discipline to read, and they love to read. And so you can go a long way in life when you're a reader, and you have reading comprehension, and you can think critically. One of the things I've been saying too about schools is that getting away from this terminology of workforce development,
Just trying.
Right. For me, it sounds too socialist. We're going to create good workers. I want to raise strong, independent thinkers who can create jobs, start businesses, find solutions, these kinds of things. They're going to be employers, not just employees. There's nothing wrong with being an employee, but the idea of just raising good workers, I think, is lowering the bar. And I'm hearing this across the Republican landscape. Is referring to we need to prepare them for the workforce. Well, I don't like to say it that way. I like to say we're gonna raise up great critical thinkers and problem solvers. So I don't want to spend too long on education. Yes, sir.
Just saying a story. Last point. We're recently from California. It was in Merrick. A gentleman, if you've ever heard of the name Victor David Hansen, he's a classicist who's really good. He spoke at length on the dystopian socialist governance of Sacramento, and you lose so much money through remittances to home countries. You have loyalties that many in Mexican culture or the Hispanic cultures, is primarily Mexico and not America so much. Really, bankruptcy of Medi-Cal over there, which is Medicaid. Because South Carolina operates in the fact that tax-paying citizens are obligated to keep all laws of taxation and governance and regulation and everything. The Hispanics aren't held to that same obligation. So they can dump their furniture, their appliances on your property. Property owner has to clean it up. So we have to keep track of that aspect of the Hispanic community, or any community that has dual loyalties that are allowed to negate their responsibilities.
Actually, I talked with a landowner not too long ago in Oklahoma, and this may be more of a county issue. People started dumping their trash, mattresses, appliances on his property, and then the city started finding him. Yeah. And he's like, "This is not me," and so he would have to pay for the cleanup of it and also pay for the fines. And so that's an area, I think that was more of a county issue that needs to be resolved, but it reminded me of that when you said that. Did you have a question in the back? No, just stretching your legs.
What do you see as issues with all the homeless, and what would be your actions?
So obviously, growing homeless rates, I mean, there's so many areas that contribute to this. One is those who are aging out of DHS. We have a large population of children that are floundering in the system. Far over the statutory timeline to be adopted. And so I actually did an interim study on this at the Capitol, and I forget the number offhand, but it's something like 22 months is the max that they should be in the system. But we're having kids in there 7 to 10 years, you know, and as a therapist will tell you, being in the system is trauma. Yeah. It's not like you're removing them from trauma and putting them in a safe place. They're in trauma being in the system. And so when they're floundering, going from foster home to foster home, not being adopted, they age out. Oftentimes they end up homeless and on drugs, no stability. And there's great organizations like, I say great, Pivot. Pivot is an organization that is working on addressing that. Unfortunately, they also have a big celebration of LGBTQ and trans kids, and so I hate that part of it, but they do help provide shelter for these kids that age out of foster care. So that's a big thing that's not often talked about, but we need to address that. And then also drug use. I want a harsher criminal penalty on meth and fentanyl and some of these harmful drugs, because sheriffs and law enforcement alike are saying that they cannot and will not spend their time arresting them because they'll just walk right back out. And we need that to be a felony. We need to increase that penalty for that. I personally, my sister, who is, praise God, clean and sober for like 3 years now, but I was praying that she would get arrested to save her own life when she was out living on the streets, you know, on meth, and wouldn't listen to reason. I mean, we tried multiple times to get her clean, wouldn't work. I was praying that she would get arrested. We were actually calling the sheriff, trying to set her up to get arrested, but it wouldn't do anything. And we knew it was where she was getting it and all of that, but it's just this cesspool of meth and fentanyl and these harsh drugs, and law enforcement, they can't do anything about it. So I want to increase that penalty for those kinds of drugs, get those people incarcerated where they can then, we need to improve the programs within the prison so they can actually improve, they can get clean, they can overcome and leave strong contributors to society. But those are two areas where I would address homelessness. That's not a direct, you know, I don't think providing housing for homeless is going to help. It's not addressing the root issue. Obviously, addressing mental health is a big one. We need more mental health beds in Oklahoma. You know, when I was in the Senate, I had requests calling in saying we have family members that need to be instituted. They're suicidal. There was no beds in Oklahoma. And there's a waiting list of like 150 right now. Waiting on a bed. So they're probably going to be homeless. They're going to harm someone or harm themselves in the meantime. God bless you.
But it also impacts healthcare because you can't get them out of the hospital.
Right. And it's a big drain on the healthcare system. You know, obviously they go to the facilities they know is going to be covered. They're not paying their bills. So that's going to increase the healthcare costs for everyone for sure. But we have to get to the root of it, you know, and there's all these efforts to house the unhoused or whatever they want to call them these days. I don't mind calling them homeless, but giving them homes is not going to help. They have root issues. They have mental issues, they have drug addictions. We need to get them stable. Even if that means getting them stable in prison, we need to do that. So yeah, it's a rampant issue though. And again, I have to prioritize the church, the local,
yes,
you know, where we have to address that locally too.
Speaking of that, what do you think about the bill that went through the House? I believe it may have passed, Stephanie knows, about giving fresh needles to the drug addicts on the street?
Right, just facilitating more drug use.
Yes.
Is awful. And what's interesting is that, again, that's part of a bill that had a lot of good things in it, but then they insert this one that makes it unbearable. I mean, that you would provide clean needles to those that were using the, whatever they call it, heroin, I guess is what they use for the needles. What was that? No, I thought that was a horrendous bill, and I think it did pass. Did it pass?
Oh my gosh.
I don't know if it passed both chambers.
It may have
but
passed the
I know it
House
passed
and dealt with the
House.
Senate, but it was getting a lot of support, I know that. Again, because it's sold on the good stuff in the bill, and they just kind of turn a blind eye to those provisions there that would provide clean needles. And the argument is, like, we'd rather them do it there than out on the street. Well, would we? I'm not sure we would. So definitely not something we want taxpayer money going towards.
Issue bills, just
Yeah,
federal money.
right.
Is there something, anything you could do as governor?
Yeah, I mean, so in addition to the structure in the House and the Senate that is upside down, I couldn't do anything directly to change that except call attention to it everywhere, which I would. Right now, Representative Charles Key, who wrote the book Stolen Government, he's working on an initiative petition to require a 3-bill minimum for all legislators. So it's good. It's good. So what I've been saying is, whereas now we have the pro tem of the Senate and the Speaker of the House, they appoint the chairman of the committees. So those chairmen then are beholden to the leadership. And if they want to keep those committee chairs, and they do, then they're going to do what he says. And so if you're at odds with one man, like in the end, Senator Treat did not like where I stood on certain things, so he said, don't hear any of Jake Merrick's bills. So whenever I wrote a bill that would forbid boys going to girls' bathrooms in our public schools, and the chair wouldn't even hear it, and I went to the chair and I said, why aren't you going to hear this bill? It's like one of the most common sense bills. He said, I don't want to talk about it. I mean, you just don't want to talk about it. Okay. I knew what had happened. He was told, don't hear his bills. Right.
Yeah.
It's happening in the Senate. It's happening in the House. What I would like to see is the body of the Senate electing the chairman of those committees.
Yes.
So now they're accountable to the body, not one man. So that's the ideal situation, in my opinion, in both chambers. The 3-bill minimum will help. Because even though they really want to shut down a particular senator or representative, they have to allow them at least 3 bills. So at least it's a step in the right direction. And he may have some other provisions in there. What was the thing you just mentioned?
I'm sorry.
The what?
Rhinos.
The rhino or something. Yeah, right. Well, you mentioned something else that made me think of it. Anyway, but that dynamic in the House has to be corrected. Oh, I think you mentioned the 3 bills.
Yeah, well, it just didn't get enough.
Yeah.
Well, what I spent a one-issue bill.
Oh, the one issue bill. That's right. Yeah. So, and I think there may be provision in that Charles Key initiative petition for one issue. It's important. It's important. And also not getting 40 bills overnight that you have to read. I mean, we need a lead in. Once a bill is introduced, they are given at least a week to read and study that bill, ask their constituents about that bill. Instead, we have bills dropped on our desk and expected to vote on it the next day or the morning of. It was very common to sit at your desk and then they pass out handouts, and they're amendments. They're amendments to the bills. And you got to get up to speed. Okay, how's this amendment going to affect the whole bill? And you got to decide before they vote in 2 minutes. So stuff like that is, well, I mean, again, situations like that, I think it's calling attention to it. I mean, we're dealing with the plague of ignorance in our society, of apathy, and we've got to call attention, let them know this is a huge deal. If you don't correct it, we'll have communism. Right. I mean, so we have to let people know what's actually going on. That's one of the things I vow to do if elected, when elected, is to say, hey, we're here to talk about DHS. But also, we should also talk about the structure in the Senate and the House. Now, upside down that. So everywhere I go, I'm going to talk about that. Talk about it in the State of the State speech. Hey, we're going to talk about this. While I have you here in the chamber, let's talk about something. Yeah. To bring it to their attention. And that's one of the beautiful things about not being bought out. Okay, that's the reason I'm running my campaign the way I'm running it. That's the reason we're asking you to buy a shirt so we can get this campaign funded without having to have big money, because that prevents people from standing boldly and saying this must be corrected because the people you may be correcting fought your way in there. So I want to be free from all of those strings. I can stand here and just call out what needs to be done and accountable only to God and the people of Oklahoma. That's what I've been saying. Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. I would definitely connect him, sign that initial petition. The 3-bill minimum would help a lot. And I don't know where he's at in that process, but he's going to need a lot of signatures.
Telling us what to do next Saturday at 9 a.m.
Wow, nice.
Right here.
Next Saturday at 9 a.m., Charles Key will be here, she said.
Yeah, he put out a call for everybody to come and be in on it.
I think it's important y'all should be here.
We're going to wind it up. Thank you, Jake. This was terrific.
Soul's alive, my heart's desire to fly, to dream, to rise and scream.